Hello, my name is Evans Mensah, and you can relive all the fun and excitement on Top Story, Newsnight, and of course, Ghana Connect via podcast. All you need to do is to log on to myjoyonline/podcast. Search for your favorite show and relive the moment. Joy 99.7 FM, your radio for discerning listeners.
So you just heard bits there of the ECOWAS communique, the communique that was issued at the end of the extraordinary summit by ECOWAS. They're giving the junta in Guinea a 6-month ultimatum to return to civilian rule. It has also been asked to immediately undertake an unconditional release of the deposed President Alpha Condé. This morning we'll try and get a sense of how the outcome of the ECOWAS summit has been received in Guinea and also analyze the implications for that country and for the sub-region as a whole. Let's know what you think. You can get onto our Facebook pages and share with us what you think. We're joining us for the conversation is Colonel Retired Festus Abuaji, a security analyst, and then Dr. Kwame Asasante, the political scientist at the University of Ghana. He's the director of the Center for European Studies, University of Ghana. Thank you both for making time to speak with us. And good morning to you both.
Good morning, Israel.
Yeah. So it's great to
have...
Good
morning to Colonel.
Good morning, Prof.
Yeah. So I'd want to start with you, Colonel Festus Abuaji. The outcome of the extraordinary summit by ECOWAS, is it likely to achieve what the ECOWAS leaders are hoping it will achieve?
First of all, thanks for having me. We did not expect any other outcome than what has been read out or was read out yesterday and has been recast on your network, because ECOWAS virtually had no option than to cite the protocol and use it as a basis now to make demands, on the new status quo in Guinea. First of all, it's not very logical that the new organ, as they chose to call it, can restore constitutional order in 6 months. Because, first and foremost, the constitution has been overthrown, according to the pushists. So they need to write a new constitution. And it's not going to be a simple matter. I think my colleague, the political scientist, can speak to that. It's not a very simple matter of throwing away the constitution that was re-engineered by Condé, which served as a proximate cause for his overthrow, and then restoring the former constitution. It's going to be an entirely new process of bringing together segments of Guinean society, as they are now, telling us, to try and get some consensus around this new constitution. 6 months is too short for that.
All right.
But even if it's possible, at the end of that process, there's got to be elections, democratic elections. And according to the protocol that the communicant, or the one who read the official communique, said, the elections have to be free, fair, transparent. And therefore, you need to lay on the ground certain arrangements. We know what it takes to run elections in this country. You need to allow time for campaigning. So there's got to be a law on political parties. You need now to get the logistics and the infrastructure in place. It's very possible that a new commissioner for elections, is going to be appointed. 6 months is not even optimistic. I mean, it's an overstatement or too ambitious. The attitude that ECOWAS has adopted, once again, is to sit in the capital of the chair and then read out demands on a state that has been overthrown. And that, we have said, is counterproductive. This meeting in Accra yesterday should have now appointed a very high level, mission, diplomats, to go back to Guinea and engage with the leaders. Now, what went the other time? For me, I didn't even understand why the leader or the chair of a Council of State should be part of that mission to Guinea. Because that leader of the Council of State is not part of the ECOWAS architecture for security. Okay. You don't find that anywhere in the 1999 mechanism, nor in the protocol of 2001 and the, conflict prevention framework 2008. So ECOWAS has missed the plot. And I think it's not too late, as we did in the Gambia, to send a high-level team of 7 leaders or retired former heads of state to go and engage them and work out a plan, a transition plan. Yeah. So far, we know that the leaders are working out their own transition plan. They are consulting segments of Guinean society. So they are adopting the right approach to right the wrongs that Condé, effected on the state. I think these are my early remarks.
Okay, so I'll come to you for us to look at the other sanctions that the ECOWAS was issued in the communique, but I'll come to you, Dr. Asah-Asante. So you also think that the 6 months is too short, and probably, and does that mean that ECOWAS didn't quite think this through?
Oh, I think, as Keno has said, and he has said it all, the time is too short for such an arrangement, because if you are talking about an overthrow of a constitutional regime and you want a restoration in terms of what military disengagement, the process is not that easy, because you need to get the basics right so that you don't have problems as you go along. So I believe that they should be able to take a second look at the time for disengagement and prepare the grounds very well for it to be proper and fit for Guinean society. But on this call, I believe that also the Guinean people must be able to help ECOWAS to succeed. What do I mean by that? That these arrangements that were done in Accra here were to promote the interests of Guineans. So they need a lot of support. For military, they will come, they want to please you in the early stages with all manner of, gestures. But I tell you, when you give them the mandate, General Ukram has made it abundantly clear to us that it is a different thing when power is in the hands of soldiers and they are governing. It becomes too difficult to control. So I believe that they should take a cue from that and then help ECOWAS to shepherd them to the promised land. I think that is the way to go.
So we've already seen visuals, and the suggestion is that Guineans are actually happy about the coup, and they prefer the gentle. They're happy that the deposed leader, Alpha Condé, has been actually taken down. How do you think they're going to react to the communique that's been issued by ECOWAS at this extraordinary summit? Dr. Asah-Asante.
Obviously, given what they experience, I'm talking about the people, this coup is just a breather for them. So you are going to have mixed reaction. Those who believe that, look, the soldiers cannot take us far, and then we need ECOWAS to intervene. And those on the other side who think that we need to get the soldiers out and all that. So there's going to be a mixed reaction. But whatever the situation is, the proper thing to do is to
Okay, so we have a bit of a challenge with Dr. Asah-Asante's connection. Okay, he's back. Dr. Asah-Asante, we lost you at some point.
Yes, I was saying that if a constitutionally elected government is overthrown and you want to get it back, it is not an easy thing. A whole lot of things need to be fixed, and Keno has said it all. But what I will add is that I don't know how they're going to manage the that aspect of the constitution which was taken away, giving Kunde the right to come back for a third term. That aspect has to be dealt with, and that is what Kenneth was saying, that yes, you need a lot of time to be able to address this. This must be looked at carefully because it's gradually becoming a phenomenon in Africa where you have leaders who connive with parliament, get certain provisions in their constitution off so as to come to power for a third time. That is when they kick against the two-term limit of holders of political power. That bit is a bit tricky, which they need to fix and fix well. More so when you want to prevent a reversal of democracy. One of the things that has really worked against emerging democracies is the issue of reversal, where people believe that if democracy will not provide the dividends that they want, then they resort to the old order, which is imposed regimes, authoritarian regimes. And that's exactly the situation that we are having here. So ECOWAS must be able to find a careful balance between these issues so as not to worsen the plight of the people. What they have put down, yes, they need to go further to make sure that the electorate gets the message right so that they don't, as it were, fight ECOWAS leaders that, yes, now there is a liberator. We were under the bondage of authoritarian, constitutionally authoritarian regime and all that. And today we have a savior, and that you want us to go back to the old order. I think a careful message must be crafted and sent to the people of Guinea so that they flow with ECOWAS to support the process, and then democracy is restored. Right. As a student of politics, I always want to believe that this thing must be done very fast because it's gradually emerging that West Africa is slipping through our finger through the issue of military coup d'etat. It's not good enough at all, because this is the era where we want to do everything possible to make democracy the only game in town. So if you have such pusher by certain sections of the people in West Africa, then I think it's a sorry story that we need to work at.
Okay. Now let's look at the demands made by the ECOWAS leaders at the end of the summit, and it's all in the communique. We'll go through it, and then I'm going to pose a question to both of you, starting with you, Kenneth Retired versus Abuaje. So it says, to uphold the suspension of Guinea from all ECOWAS governing bodies until the restoration of constitutional order, to ensure the conduct of presidential and legislative elections within 6 months in order to restore constitutional rule in the Republic of Guinea, which you both say is unrealistic, to impose sanctions in accordance with extant ECOWAS protocols of travel bans on the members of the CNRD and their family members, and of freeze of their financial assets, to call on the African Union, the European Union, the United Nations, and other multilateral and bilateral partners to support the implementations of these sanctions, and then to ensure that no member of the CNRD is allowed to contest in the presidential election. ECOWAS to accompany Guinea in the swift resolution of the crisis and in the preparation of for the elections. And then it says, the authority calls on the African Union, the United Nations, and development partners to endorse the decisions and support the restoration of constitutional rule in the Republic of Guinea. This sounds to me, Kenneth versus Abuaje, that ECOWAS essentially says, okay, we probably don't have what it takes to make these sanctions bite, and so we are calling on the African Union, the EU, and the United Nations to help make this possible. Is that to suggest that ECOWAS is acknowledging that, yeah, we can't quite get this, or we don't have what it takes to get the people to do what we want them to do?
Ordinarily, because we are a global community, you cannot expect that even America, powerful as it is, can impose sanctions and then leave it to America alone to enforce. America needs the rest of the international community to buy into any sanctions or embargoes that it imposes. The difference is that America can flex muscles. ECOWAS cannot flex muscles. Now, I want to make the point also that I've made it somewhere several times that all countries have friends. So look at the institutions or organizations that the communique has read out. Yes, the UN, yes, African Union. But we know that Russia is supporting the junta or the junta. So among the international community, there are going to be certain countries whose national interest will be served if they continue to engage with Guinea. Again, there will be business interest, especially those who are who have mining concessions for the diamonds. So it is not all dry when ECOWAS reads out these sanctions. Secondly, the members of the new regime have work to do at home. They have very little opportunity or need to travel anywhere. We know what has happened in our country in the past decades, that when you overthrow a government, you have a lot of work to do. So these individuals are not going to travel anywhere. Secondly, unless maybe they're going to launder money, the money that colonels have, when we used to be in service and those who are in service, it's not large enough to go and keep in any foreign bank. All the monies are in Guinea with local banks. So it's not very effective that these individuals will have their accounts frozen and so on and so forth. But what worries me all the time is, as ECOWAS keeps citing the protocol, and as our colleague has mentioned, ECOWAS realized in 2015 thereabout that this third term agenda is a trigger for instability within the region. And ECOWAS now started to chart a plan to try and correct that and impose a 2-term limit. Our leaders, the club of leaders, not the club of the people of ECOWAS, kicked against that. Precisely Togo and I think Yahya Jammeh's Gambia. And yesterday, some of them who had also engineered their constitutions or re-engineered them were in Accra imposing sanctions on the military regime. So it's not going to work. You see, the principle is that ECOWAS ought to engage with those who are now in power. They are the new reality. They are the status quo. There is no alternative to them. The communique itself admits tacitly, without explicitly saying it, that Condé is a past tense because they are calling for elections and they are not saying that Condé must be restored, So constitutionalism is not only about the military taking up guns. It is also those civilian politicians who flout the very protocols. In that protocol of 2001, the first article has to do with the constitutional convergence principles. And it lays out a lot of things, unconstitutionalism on the part of civilian leaders. But anytime civilian leaders misbehave and violate the provisions of ECOWAS protocols, ECOWAS does not even make any noise. We don't hear about that. They don't condemn it. They don't impose sanctions. And then at the installation of these leaders who have re-engineered themselves into power, ECOWAS leaders will go and sit, tacitly endorsing that arrangement. So we cannot go on like this. Nobody wants a coup. But like sickness, if you don't want to be sick, you keep your environment clean. You adhere to all the protocols that will keep you healthy. That is not what ECOWAS is doing politically. And I think there are serious challenges in that regard. So the sanctions will not work. It's counterproductive. It antagonizes the new leaders in, in Guinea, and probably to embolden them to say, look, we're going to do our own thing. They plus the people of Guinea. And I've said they have friends. Guinea has friends. It is not all the 15 member states of ECOWAS who are going to rigidly enforce the sanctions. The neighboring states will have it in their interest to have a stable Guinea, not one that is unstable because of the sanctions. They will find ways and means of going around that. We also know that in African economies are largely informal, with the exception maybe of South Africa and Botswana and Co. So all the border communities around Guinea will continue to do their business, and therefore you can find goods coming in and out of Guinea in spite of the sanctions. I don't know. You see, we shouldn't be coming to the media every now and then discussing this, and there is work to be done. And I think we can do it. Our leaders can do it if they want to be very, very honest and not hypocritical as they have been or continue to be.
Dr. Kwame Asasante, if the sanctions are not going to work, as Colonel Festus Obaje is saying, how would you advise that ECOWAS approach this?
Yeah, we need to talk to members of the junta in a continuous and unprovocative manner, so that at the end of the day, they will see reason why they should step down. If you look at the communique, efforts have been made to get democracy restored through free and fair election. That is an area that we need to also look at very carefully. Why am I saying that? Because we saw the election that brought about a third-term agenda, which was rigged, handled in any form and shape that did not align with the dictates of democratic processes. This time around, as we have said already, we need time to think through all these things to get them right. If you look at the elections that they are going to have, all things being equal, they must be able to craft carefully how the elections are going to be conducted. The pre-election phase, the election phase, and the post-election phase. These things must be spelled out clearly. But before we even come there, we are looking at how we are going to handle the constitution, because if they are going to come out with a new constitution, my worry and fear is that sometimes these constitutions, when soldiers lead the country into writing some of these things, the constitutions are tailor-made for them. Tailor-made in the sense that they are drawn to satisfy the interests of the military leaders. And we have seen that under the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, where a lot of things were done in favor of Mr. Rawlings, who were trying to shed off his uniform to become a Democrat and all that. So that's one thing that they must be careful about. Not only that, they should also look at the issue of what? Electoral malpractices and how they are going to deal with that. Because it becomes pointless when you have elections that are rigged to suit a particular group and all that. Then we are back to square one. That is something that the people must also be aware of. And also, we need to make it clear to the people of Guinea that, yes, there is all states are sovereign, and that it is difficult for a country to put pressure on a sovereign state and all that. But the popular sovereignty, the right to decide for a particular type of government that will assist the country, that power lies in the hands of the people of Guinea. They must not be oblivious of this fact, that so that anytime they go for elections, they are able to throw away people who will not support the cause of democracy, and of course, by extension, the development of that country. That right must not be toyed with at all. More often than not, we tend to condemn people who are in the sub-region, who have what it takes to handle these things. But also, the people in the country have a responsibility towards their own lives. And that is how they handle their own affairs through elections, so that when that opportunity comes, they will be able to handle the issues the way it ought to be done. That is one thing that I need to draw our listeners' attention to.
Had earlier made reference to this attempt by ECOWAS to impose the two-term limit on the member states. Is this something that you would advise, Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, that they probably go back to and have another look at?
You see, the issue of tenure did not start today. If you go to the Greek history, at a point in time, they decided that let us have a tenure where people come to office once and throughout their life, they don't come again. Later, they revise them and then move on. They realize that tenure is good in the sense that it really empowers the people to serve their state at least for one term. And later, they extended it to 2 terms and all that. In the current state of affairs, the modern state that really went on with the Greek agenda was was France, which decided in 1700s thereabouts, decided to institute the tenure as something to check holders of political power. Take it from me, anybody given power that is not checked, we are guided by Lord Acton that that power is likely to be corrupted and abused. So that is why tenure comes in. So I don't see why the good people will sit down, craft a constitution, and give a term limit to those who hold political power in the state, and only for a few disgruntled people to turn around and kick the constitution in the name of what? Redeeming, saving, and all manner of things doing to deceive the people of Guinea. That is unfair. So I believe that we should send a strong signal to the people that if they get opportunity for a new constitution to be drawn, they must insist on having a 2 tenure, and that anybody who tries to tamper with it, that person has his or fingers bent. And that message should go to all, not only the people of Guinea, but all the people of Africa. And that once your tenures comes to an end, there is no point trying to circumvent the process and come back. Once you do that, you get the wrath of the people. But not only tenure. We need to even look at the situation in Guinea. It is also born out of a result of bad governance. We need leaders who will think about the welfare of their people, because there's no point having a democracy which is fruitless. Every democracy must inure or must produce the public good that people will enjoy and support the status quo. And because any attempt that depart from this type of process, people now begin to think about the old order, which is a reversal. And that has really undermined countries such as some Eastern European countries, Latin American countries, and all that. The experience, there are a lot of stories in this regard that we don't have time to recount. Yeah. But all of them should be able to guide us so that we walk the path very carefully and get the public exercise done and done well.
Now, Colonel J, ECOWAS has been heavily criticized for looking on as Alpha Condé overthrew the constitution. What would you, or what can ECOWAS do if they see any such thing happening in a member country? Apart from, as they have already indicated, they engaged behind the scenes. But what else can they do apart from engaging behind the scenes, because it's a sovereign country?
You see, we keep hearing this side of the debate that you've just hinted, excuse my language, by so-called Democrats, that when it affects civilian leaders, then they cite sovereignty, that because states are sovereign, ECOWAS has very little to do. Now, Guinea is still a state. It's got a new regime, albeit military. It is still a state. The state has not collapsed. You see, so at a minimum, the vehemence that ECOWAS attaches to addressing military coups, the same vehemence must be applied and deployed by ECOWAS when civilian leaders misapply the rules and the regulations. So one, they have to make public statements condemning those attempts, re-engineering constitutions, rigging elections blatantly, and so on and so forth. Two, they have to do what they are doing to military regimes and impose sanctions and embargoes and restrictions, no travel bans, and so on and so forth. And they don't have to go and attend the endorsements. If they don't do that, and they do the opposite, then they are being hypocritical, which I have said. So the whole idea is that, yes, states are sovereign, but when we enter into regional arrangements, we cede a bit of our sovereignty to those regional arrangements to exercise supranational authority. The provisions of ECOWAS are sufficient in that regard. Again, what is happening now, which is a worry to many analysts, many political scientists and governance experts and so on, that we are going back to the 70s or 60s, 70s, when we used to have lifetime presidencies and so on, and therefore the only way to remove them was through a coup. We're going back there. So it brings us back to the debate that how should regional organizations be organized? Should it be based on benchmarks that have to be met? Or must it be a club of the good, the bad, and the ugly? Now, Africa, in general, has opted for the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we have in our regional organizations and continental organizations, member states who are very autocratic. We can mention names. So there are those who don't apply any rules, who violate all the protocols and all the conventions, and yet are allowed to continue. And the only way to deal with civilian unconstitutionalism there are two ways. One is through a popular uprising, which occasionally happens. Classic examples being the Arab Spring 2011. Now, if you don't have popular uprising, the alternative of dealing with civilian unconstitutionalism is through the barrel of the gun. And the military, in all instances, will make that attempt. In fact, the General Kran's book, Politics of the Sword, that the professor has alluded to, has debated this dilemma. That when we say protect the Constitution, as indeed we have even in the Ghanaian Constitution, what does it entail? The same Constitution says that at the peril of our lives, we must protect and defend the Constitution. So it is not only the individuals, it is also the institutions of the state. The military institution is such that it is, clothed with coercive tools. And therefore, what the military does by overthrowing autocratic regimes who don't abide by constitutional provisions and regional, sub-regional protocols is actually aligning themselves with the text of the Constitution. To avoid that, because it comes with a lot of challenges, let our leaders learn to rule, let them learn to govern, let them avoid complacency. Because this gentleman who has been overthrown, that ECOWAS is saying that must be released. I've just read Al Jazeera. Before his overthrow, he was blatantly saying that he was the only one who can rule Guinea or govern Guinea, and that the military will not overthrow him or cannot overthrow him. Why? Because being the supreme leader, he had formed his own presidential guard regiment. All of these are signs that there is something in the DNA of our political leaders which is not democratic. And that is what we need to address. The unconstitutional, undemocratic tendencies of our leaders, who, when they are elected into power, think that they have become chiefs and kings, and they are not subject to any other authority except themselves. Part of the challenge that we have is also that the constitutional convergence principles talks about the separation of the powers. But in African democracies, as a professor mentioned, you can have the executive actually co-opting the legislature and becoming one and the same. In fact, in our country, without being a political scientist, I have said that political parties are coterminous with the state, because nothing happens in Ghana or in African countries without the clearance of the political parties. The government, the executive have excessive influence over the legislature, and indeed can also buy the judiciary. The politics itself, which we pride ourselves on or off, has become money. So democracy is only a facade. The basis, the foundations are very, very weak. Yeah. And these are the issues that we need to address. You can't go for elections that you rig because you have money to buy the electorate, buy the votes, and then when you get the power, you then use the power to serve your interests, create structures that are unconstitutional. Let me mention, as in this country, the private militias of political parties, the infusion of these elements into the security forces, the creation of unconstitutional presidential security guards and so on. These are all unconstitutional tendencies on the part of civilian leaders. It is not necessary at all. It creates conditions for tensions, fault lines, or deepens the fault lines within society. And the only alternative, or one of the few alternatives, would be for the military to step in.
Zabaje, you've made this point a second time, and I want to get some clarity on that. Essentially, from what you're saying, our constitutions essentially endorse or accommodate the intervention of the military. Is that the case?
The case is that, as the professor said, if you are left with a constitution that was carefully crafted to provide certain safeguards for those who did the revolutions and the mutinies, 27 years down the line, we have not found the collective will, in spite of the Constitutional Review Commission's recommendations, was it of 2011, we have not found the collective will to reform the Constitution and remove all the, not the safeguards, but there are so many other things, like this excessive power that we give to presidents who become feudal kings. That is where the problem is. And the other day I was really disheartened when the president said that it has served us well for 27 years. This Constitution has served only a few very well for 27 years. The majority of the Ghanaians are the ones that we don't think about who are suffering. And we need to find a way to reform the Constitution. I, as an individual, find it very, very immoral for the kinds of monies that we are paying to our politicians, parliamentarians, and so on. When the ordinary people, teachers who have worked, excuse my language, their asses for 30 years, go on pension and they cannot afford money to buy their medication because of the conditions under which they live. They are all hypertensive, they are all diabetic, and they are dying. And yet the few have money to buy VH. You know, the state gives them all the perquisites. The vehicles that we give them, I said it, supposed to be used for state functions. They use them every Saturday, running out of the roads with motorcades, flashing lights. Every now and then we hear somebody, including attorney generals, the president, saying that this must not be the case. And yet these individuals have been voted into power to ensure that everybody as a citizen can live in the country and have equal rights and equal opportunities. The opportunities must not only be for the few. These things which were lacking in some societies, like Guinea, to the extreme, were the basis of coups. You see it. And therefore, nobody must go away very, very complacent that coups cannot happen. We heard this a few months ago when a certain professor told me that coups cannot happen. And I told him that he was wrong. If the principles or the fundamentals for coups are in place, coups will happen. Therefore, address the fundamentals, the denominators of coups, and you don't have coups. Our societies have become highly unequal. And yet we have other threats, you know, the threats of terrorism, the threats of violent extremism. We develop documents. Look, when I saw that document that Ghana enunciated, countering violent extremism, it reads well. But go and look at all the indices in that document and ask yourself whether we are meeting those parameters. The fact is that we are not meeting them. People don't have good water to drink. The schools are dilapidated. You know, pregnant women suffer to go to hospitals, you know, access health delivery and so on. And our politicians are running around in affluence, you know, in abundance. And they think that everything is fine. Then they go and give cramps to the people and think that, oh, okay, everything is fine. Everything is not fine.
Yeah.
We need to make fundamental changes in our African societies. And you know, and I know, that this is not what happens in the other democracies. Presidents don't charter flights of their choice at the expense of the state and travel anywhere they want. They don't do that. And if they do that, there are provisions for those presidents to reimburse the state for those expenses. So the checks and balances, and I think the political scientists can talk to, the checks and balances are very, very weak in our societies.
Yeah.
You know, and that is part of the problem.
Right. Thank you very much, Colonel Festus Abaji. And we started this conversation as a Guinea conversation, but it turns out that we've brought the matter home. And I'll come to you, Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante. It looks like there are things that we have to look at as a country to avoid situations such as Guinea. What's your position on all of that?
Yes. Thanks, Israel. You know, if you want to really firm democracy in the sub-region, and for that matter, in this country, then the continuous education on democratic ethos must go on unabated. Why am I saying that? Because you have always soldiers who want to use some excuses to come to power. And we know them from political scientists' perspective, that the theories that govern military rule and military, takeovers. One of it is the issue that Colonel alluded to, the issue of the military seeing themselves as the only institution equipped with the capacity to turn things around when we are in difficult times. So as we have seen in Guinea, issue of politicization of the bureaucracy. And that was something that really triggered the coup of 1966 in Ghana, where there was a politicization of the army. Efriva and Co. were talking about the politicization of the Ghana Armed Forces, the CPification of the Ghana Armed Forces and all that. Ken will bear me out of this when you read Efriva's book on the coups. All right. And not only that, but they also talk about issue of, internal wranglings and all that. Huntington described this thing as the Praetorian theory and the rest of it. But if you also come to the issue of what group identity, where they believe that, yes, the military should do the needful by protecting civil authority and all that, because of their training in Sanghat, the training in Mons, Imperial College and whatnot. So any deviation of it, you see soldiers quickly rushing to overthrow regime and all that. And of course, the issue of civilian regime performance. Soldiers believe that they are those who have the wherewithal to deal with cracks of government or cracks within government, and then poor governance programs and all that.
Dr. Kwame Asah-Asante, but beyond apart from the military, is there any other institution that can intervene realistically?
Yeah, but the issue is that constitutions always provide safety nets for some of these things, that the people must be vigilant and, take up the opportunity to kick government when they go on this tangent. Take, for instance, the issue of our political sovereignty, which I have alluded to already, that it is difficult for a body like ECOWAS to talk so much about how things ought to be done in Guinea because of what? Sovereignty. Each state is sovereign in its own right. But the political sovereignty rests with the people, the power to throw government away. So when you are giving opportunity to go for a referendum, you don't go and endorse a process that will lead to a third-term agenda. And that is in the hands of the people. So we are saying that some of these things exist, even though I'm not oblivious of the fact that elections could be rigged and all that,
exactly,
and you will not get the mandate of the people expressed. And that is why we are saying that going forward in Guinea, when they are crafting constitution, they must be very careful as to what they put into constitution so that we prevent these things from happening. It's a difficult, I must say, it's a difficult route, path to walk on, but it can be done.
All right.
Another issue that can really help us is the issue of bringing the big boys in the political equation. I am not an advocate of, asking for external bodies to come into a country's political game and all that. But when push comes to shove, we have no alternative than to look at them and bring them in. France and the other powers have done it before. If you look at African democratic experience, during the founding elections, when we say founding elections, from 1989 to 1994, Africans decided to go back to what? Civilian regimes. And the first election that were conducted, we realized that they did not get it on a silver platter. Countries decided to threaten them, i.e. the US, the international financial institutions such as the World Bank, IMF, began to make democracy a requirement for accessing financial assistance. And that really worked the trick. And France also did so well by impressing it upon its people that, yes, anybody who wants to do business with France must be democratic. This is the time that we need them to also help ECOWAS to do the needful so that we'll be able to restore democracy in Guinea and other places that are gradually slipping through our fingers.
All right. Thank you very much.
Also,
Dr. Kwame Asante, we've actually run out of time, so we'll have to wrap up the conversation at this point. But I just wanted to conclude that even though you're talking about, yes, bringing in the big boys, the France and the US and the others, a lot of the time it turns out that they actually have their own interest, and their interests can sometimes complicate the situations in these countries and the attempt to resolve the problem. So we can't run away from that fact. But
it is true. But they are the powers that we cannot do away with. Are we saying that we have what it takes to run this thing on our own? We have sat down here in Africa to allow third-term agenda to fester and destroy countries. But trust me, if you bring the big boys in, irrespective of their interests, Colonel has alluded to the issue of friendship with mighty Russia and the rest. When you begin to talk to them, they have a way of handling this thing so that at the end of the day, it will not jeopardize their economic interests as well as political interests.
All right.
That careful balance ought to be defined so that we get out of this, panda. It's a difficult balance, but we need to work it well so as to bring a smile on the faces of people of West Africa and to make sure that democracy survives. Take it or leave it. Without democracy, I don't think there is any other alternative.
All right, Dr. Kwame Asante, thank you very much. And to you too, Colonel Retired Festus Abuaje, thank you very much to you both for making time to speak with us. Have a wonderful day.
Most grateful.
You're still here on the AM show. You have more coming up. Moments with Joy. KMJ, the host of Moments with Joy, will join us for that exciting conversation about this thing happening on the multimedia platforms. Do stay tuned in. We're back in a bit.